proceedings were kicked off by the arrival interpoint cook of the two C130J Hercs from RAAF Base Richmond, northwest of Sydney, which is where No. 37 Squadron, who operate the aircraft, is based. Of course, before we got to play with the aeroplanes, we had to have an official welcome and a reminder of why we were there.
This is a historic occasion for the Royal Australian Air Force. On the 1st of March 1914, the first flight of a military aircraft took place at this site, Point Cook in Victoria, in a Bristol box kite, and we have a flying replica of that aircraft behind us in the hangar. Point Cook is a historic place. This is the longest continuously operating military airfield in the world.
This is a Bristol box kite replica which we have constructed over the last 6 years and have test flown, and it will be, hopefully, if the weather's in our favour, on the 1st of March we will fly it again to replicate the flight which Phil Byrne has just talked about, which was here on Sunday the 1st of March 1914.
Next, we had a quick general briefing with Airlift Group's comms guy, Eamon Hamilton, before having a safety briefing from the aircrew and Loadmasters. Finally, it was time to strap in and taxi out. Taking off from runway 17 meant we also got a glimpse of the original hangars in which that Bristol box kite was put together all those years ago. Once we got off the ground, we made about a 270-degree turn to the right so that we could make a low pass back over Point Cook and then head northeast towards the city. And then it was time to open the ramp. We'd been briefed to keep our eyes and mouth covered while that took place in case of crud flying about, but as it happened, I didn't really notice any. Most of us on board got a chance to don a harness and take a closer look out the ramp. It was helpful to have a loadie holding onto the harness to be able to maintain footing while looking through the camera. Now, I've done city orbits over Melbourne in a light single and passed over just after sunrise in a hot air balloon, but I have to admit this is one hell of a way to see the sights. Although the temperature on the ground was climbing into the 30s, it was nice and cool with the ramp open. The downside, of course, is that it's also pretty noisy, so the use of earplugs is standard. Without a headset, verbal communication is impossible, so it's hand signals all round. After I got my footage, ATC Ben had a go as well and got some great clips on his iPhone. Flying low and slow over the city on a hot day, one would expect a bumpy ride. Add to this the constant, and at times hard, manoeuvring to keep our chase aircraft positioned nicely for the camera ship up front, and a few people, myself included, started to feel the effects. With sick bag close to hand and a serious case of the cold sweats, but determined still to enjoy myself, I made my way up to the pointy end when given the signal. I later found out that it was right about this time that half a dozen journos down the back parted company with their breakfasts. Well, if the view from the back was impressive, jump seating was, well, beyond words really. To be able to sit right behind the crew and watch what it takes to keep this big bird positioned in the wake of another Herc was something else. All the while watching the sights of Melbourne passing by, not much more than 1,000 feet below. I was amused to note that because of our altitude and configuration, we did get a couple of landing gear and terrain warnings that had to be overridden. Awesome as the flight was, I was not alone in feeling some relief at being back on terra firma. But of course it wasn't time to head home quite yet, as no PCDU video would be complete without a quick crew interview, so I gave it a shot.
Well, I was up the front there with you for the tail end of the flight and for the landing, and saw you were working pretty hard there.
Yeah, it's quite bumpy conditions today. You can feel, I mean, you can see now our shirts and stuff are blowing. It's probably up to 30 odd knots of wind out there, and especially when it gets around the city, you get the buildings sort of make it spin around, and with me sat behind the lead aircraft with the wingtip vortices and everything coming off, yeah, it was quite hard for me today. I was working.
You were saying before it's a 150 knot limit for the back door to be open, and what happens if you exceed that?
Technically, the aircraft would need maintenance, and so it would be a phone call back home. The technicians would have to have a think about, how far we oversped by, and therefore what work they needed to do. The aircraft's very clever. It has a computer on board that registers pretty much every action we do, and the card will then download when we get back to Richmond, and it will, even if you didn't think you oversped, it may tell you oversped.
Right, so not a good look.
No, you don't want to be the person that overstresses.
Now today is of course all about promoting the Centenary of Military Aviation event that's happening, and you're going to be here for that as well?
Yeah, indeed. We're going to mount out of Richmond on the 1st of March and the 2nd. We're going to fly down here. We'll probably hold about 30 miles off the coast, wait for our slot, and then I'll come in and do a handling display. So show again how we operate the aircraft to its limits, and do some manoeuvres that you wouldn't necessarily normally do in a Hercules, but just to show that it's very, very capable airplane. And then come back on the 2nd and do the same thing again.
Well, Sergeant Greg Milne was one of the Loadmasters on our chase plane today. G'day, Greg.
G'day, good to meet you again.
Good flight.
Yeah, it was. It was a little bit bumpy up there.
It was a little bit bumpy, and a few people didn't cope that well, did they?
No, but it happens.
Yeah. What's it like for you guys?
We get used to it. The more we do it, the stomach and the body gets acclimatised a little bit more. So, but it can still be a bit upsetting on the stomach.
What are some highlights of this job?
Airdrop. Airdrop's always the best part.
Right.
Operations, humanitarian. Any of those sorts of things.
So what sort of deployments have you been doing recently?
Middle East, a couple of times last year. We've done Queensland floods. We've and then Timor with Honiara, taking troops and stores into there.
But when you've got when you're doing humanitarian drops and things like that, where you have a full load of cargo, how much work do you guys have to do, and how do you interface or communicate with the crew up front in terms of what's going on with that?
With the load, obviously, before we get airborne, then we'll do our weight and balance. There's limitations that we must be within so that the aircraft can fly within its limits safely. That are all pre-calculated for us. So we'll do a load plan. We'll decide what goes where. We'll confirm that it actually balances and is within our limits, and then we'll take it up the front and what we call punch it in the box, enter it into the aircraft systems, and that information's then taken in for takeoff speeds and all those performance details that the pilots need to know. So.
All right, well, thanks very much. Thanks for the flight, and thanks for keeping us from falling out the back. That was a great experience.
Our pleasure.
Cheers.
The Centenary of Military Aviation Air Show takes place on the weekend of the 1st and 2nd of March 2014. Tickets are available from Ticketek and include public transport to and from the event. For full details, visit airforce.gov.au/airshows.
Join the in-depth discussion on all topics aviation related at planecrazydownunder.com or search iTunes for Plane Crazy Down Under.
Southern Skies. Online media.